Paul Schwartz joins us here, as promised, on Big Board Sports. Good morning, Paul.
Roger, Zach, how you guys doing?
We're good. Boy, after a 2-0 start, things look pretty promising, and then it's been all downhill since. What are the problems here, Paul? Loaded question with this Giants team right now at 2-3.
Well, it happens. I mean, don't forget, last year they were 3-2, right? And things were pointing up, and then they only won 3 games the rest of the year. So, in the NFL, like no other sport, you win a few games or you lose a few games, and the swing is just incredible. And then, but it doesn't mean it only means those 2 games. The biggest problem right now is very simple. They're not scoring enough points. I mean, that's all there is to it. Defense isn't great, but, I think if I did a secret poll of 20 prominent Giants players and coaches last week and said, you're going to go into Green Bay and hold down Aaron Rodgers and the Packers to 23 points. I think out of those 20 people, maybe 18 of them would say, "Oh, great! I think we're going to win the game." You know what I mean? We can figure out a way to get 24 points against the defense that is vulnerable against the pass, and it didn't happen. So, the defense has had some issues. They've had some injuries. The offense has really not had a lot of injuries, but they've had issues, and that's the thing holding them back. It's 180 degrees different than last year when the offense could score points and the defense couldn't stop anybody. Right now, the defense is the tougher, more relentless, more consistent group, and the offense is just not getting it done.
Yeah, and certainly the offensive line has not been great, and the performance of Eric Flowers over at left tackle has been less than stellar.
Yeah, I mean, and the performance of a lot of people. I think the performance of Eli Manning has been less than stellar. The offensive line, most fans were really worried about that going into the season. The big problem is that, Eric Flowers is not supposed to be one of those problems. He's the first-round draft pick. He's the guy who started at left tackle. The problems are supposed to be, not at center with Weston Richburg, who's a second-round pick, not at right guard with Justin Pugh, who's a first-round pick. It's supposed to be on the right side. That's been well documented with Marshall Newhouse and John Jerry. Newhouse is hurt, and they put Bobby Hart in there. He's done okay. John Jerry has done okay. But Flowers has not been good. He gets a holding penalty, at least one every game. I talked to a former NFL offensive lineman who said that his technique, his hand placement is so bad that he could get called for holding almost every pass protection, and he will average more than one holding call a game. And, so far that's come to fruition.
What do you make of Eli? He's had coming off a couple of good years, at least statistically, Paul, where he's had good numbers. What is it about Eli that does not look right to you right now?
How long we got? Well, I don't think he's throwing the ball great, which is leading to questions whether he's healthy, whether he feels good. I wouldn't be shocked if there's some irritation or something somewhere, but I think it's more mental than physical actually right now. I don't think he's throwing the ball great, but I think his vision is getting lowered by that pass rush, and he is not looking down the field like he normally or wants to do. I don't think he trusts the protection around him, probably with good reason. The game plans have been as such where they do not want him to get sacked, because when he gets sacked, he fumbles the ball, which is we saw again last week. In Minnesota, there were no sacks against that ferocious Vikings front group that had 8 sacks the week before against Cam Newton. So clearly the strategy was we're going to get the ball out of Eli's hands as quickly as possible, even if that means he's just going to throw it into the ground. Well, that's fine as far as protecting your sack numbers and limiting fumbles, but it's not very good when you're trying to score some points on offense. And I think some of that was in effect this past game in Green Bay. Let's face it, guys. The Packers were 27th in the league in pass defense, and were playing without not one, but their 2 starting cornerbacks. And the Giants did virtually nothing to exploit that. And, that's a problem schematically, coaching, and certainly player-wise.
Hey, Paul, Zach By hanging out with Roger this morning. I got to ask you, I know sometimes we get caught up, almost in the hyperbolic nature of 5 days a week on sports talk radio, but we look ahead to this game against the Ravens. Does it feel like a must win, or do you think they could afford? You obviously don't want to, but could they afford to lose another one and still be in the mix in 7 or 8 weeks?
Well, Zach, clearly the division is not, middling around and doing nothing like a lot of people thought it would. Once Tony Romo went down, everyone discounted, or most people discounted the Cowboys, and they can't lose now with Dak Prescott. And, the Redskins, after their 0-2 start with 2 home losses, a lot of us looked at it and said, well, the Redskins, last year was a fluke. Well, they're proving that they're not they're a contender anyway. And, the Eagles, after 3-0, they lose a game. Now they lose an offensive lineman to a 10-game suspension. But, they're going to hang around, certainly, no question about it. And the Giants are sitting in last place. In football, there are more must-wins than any other sport. They just are because of the nature of it. We have, 6 days to talk about the games. And, one game seems like such a momentum killer or builder. Look, if this was Cleveland Browns at home, I would say, yeah, they have to win this game because, who else, if you can't beat them, you can't beat anybody. I mean, the Ravens right now are as good as the Giants. They're not a team the Giants should walk over by any means. The Ravens have a good defense. But yes, they need to stop the bleeding. Certainly, whenever you have a home game and it's not against one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the league, you kind of sort of have to win that game. Especially since the Rams, we all looked at the Rams at the start of the year, and certainly after their first game of the season, and said, the Giants will go to London and take care of business against the Rams. Well, lo and behold, the Rams are pretty good, and they have a really good defense, and it's a game in London, which kind of all bets are off with, as far as which team handles that situation better. So. Yeah, I mean, without saying it's a must-win, and I won't write that it's a must-win, but, at some point you need to win just to, make sure you're not going to lose 10 games every year.
Paul Schwartz with us, beat writer, New York Post, covering the Giants, good friend of the program for many, many years. Paul, what about Ben McAdoo? How's he handled the 3-game losing streak?
How has he handled it? Well, I don't know if he's handled it great. I don't know if there's a great way to handle a 3-game losing streak. He has stayed true to himself, which I guess is good for himself, not necessarily good for fans and the media, because he doesn't give us a whole lot. He's not very expansive during the week, and he's really not expansive after games. Tom Coughlin, we kind of grew to expect that after games, he was good after games, and he was often better after a loss, just as far as producing copy and making statements and questioning, not really himself as much, but certainly, questioning what was going on and players and calls and debating things. McAdoo will have none of that at all, none of that. He will. He doesn't really take kindly to questioning his strategy. Why didn't you call a timeout? Did you think of making this personnel change, things like that? He just doesn't want to engage in it. I don't know if he knows these questions have to be asked. He doesn't want to engage in it. So I think the jury is still out on Ben McAdoo, how he's handling the losing streak. Interestingly, after the game against the Vikings, which he knew was against a really, really top defense, he said, I asked him the question, what does it say about an offense that is 6th in yardage and 27th in scoring? You're moving the ball up and down the field, but you're not scoring. And he said, I think it means we're ready to break out. Mm-hmm. It means we're due. Okay, now, he said that knowing that he was going into Green Bay and confident that his team would put up some points in Green Bay, and they didn't. So chalk that one up into he didn't read his team correctly column.
Yeah, and I thought they would put up points against Green Bay. I mean, they were the Packers, if I stand corrected here, Paul, they were shorthanded too a little bit in their secondary, and I thought that Eli, with his 3 receivers, right, these 3 receivers that we talk about with Odell and Victor and Sterling, that these guys would get open and there would be some completions and a lot more than just one touchdown, which didn't come until late in the game.
Well, there's no question. I mean, that's what I was saying. Holding the Packers to 23 points, really 20 if you think of it, because the fumble, put the Packers in field goal position. So 23 points is what they got. And let me ask you something, Roger. If I told you I have a crystal ball, the Packers will score 23 points Sunday night, what would you have said the Giants' chances are of winning?
I would say they're very good.
Okay, well, I don't disagree with that.
I would have said that.
I think you figured, well, Eli will figure a way with those receivers to get 24 points.
Yeah.
And if I told you the Giants are going to intercept Aaron Rodgers twice,
right,
you would have said, well, there's very little chance they'll lose the game.
Correct.
Look, put it this way. Victor Cruz, his first game in 2011, he did not catch a pass, okay? Since then, he has caught at least 2 passes in 59 consecutive games that he's played. We know he's been hurt. In the games he's played, he's caught at least 2 passes in 59 consecutive games, counting the postseason, and he did not get 1 reception in that game, which is mind-boggling.
I'm with you. We'll see what happens against the Ravens. A 1:00 kick on Sunday. And Paul, always appreciate a few minutes of your time here on Big Board Sports. We'll be back in touch.
Thank you. If you got any more time here, I need a little roundup of Albany-Richmond, which sounded good, and the start of basketball. You know, I know there's a lot of new players there.
Yeah,
what do we got?
I got to tell you right now, Paul, the atmosphere at Bob Ford Field on Saturday was as good as we've ever seen. Man, 9,200 people.
I did watch the game, by the way, on my laptop.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes, but I couldn't get the atmosphere as much because I wasn't there.
Yeah, and they had plenty of chances to pull out what would have been the biggest win in the history of the program outside of the Buffalo victory, which was over the FBS school. But in conference, CAA with Richmond being as good as they are, could have won that game, lost 36-30. I think there was still more wins coming out of that than anything because the fans that were there, that kind of proved to them, wow, this program is on the right track. This is a good team. So I think that was a win for Albany in that category. And, I think they have a shot to make the playoffs, to be honest with you.
Well, I would be shocked. I mean, I would be shocked if they made the playoffs. And, I think it's going to be very important for them to win some of these quote-unquote, games they're supposed to win, go on the road against these average teams in the CAA. I think that's going to be the real litmus test for a program like this because there are no games you should win when you're kind of building like that. But, they look good. The defense looks pretty feisty to me.
They are feisty, and it's one of the strengths of the team.
How about Paul Schwartz watching the game on a laptop? Paul, how did we sound on the call? That's most importantly.
In Green Bay, Wisconsin.
In Green Bay, Wisconsin. I love it.
Yeah,
that's
but I put the sound down because I can't stand the guys who do the game.
I love it. And by the way, the hoop team to be determined because they've got like 7 new players, and I haven't seen any practices yet. They're junior college transfers, which is the road that Will Brown likes to go down. But knowing his track record, I'll just bet you that Albany will be able to compete for an America's championship again this season.
Yeah, I need some. You guys got to let me know about some of these names because I know the guys they got coming back,
right.
And when I look at that roster, I think they need a couple of really good players, other guys here. So hopefully some of those transfer guys can do it. We
will figure it out for you and report back to you. Always a pleasure for a few minutes. Thanks, you, Paul.
Guys. Take care.
You got it. Paul Schwartz, New York Post, went to Albany. That's why his interest level in Albany athletics with the football and the basketball, he loves to follow both those programs.
Covering the New York Giants in Green Bay, Wisconsin, listening to you and I call the game on a laptop.
And said the sound was down there.
He's busting our chops. He listens. He loves it, man.